Hello, my name's Colin Crithers, and I'm a student reporter and broadcaster at the University of Iowa. As a journalist, my job is to tell stories, while also balancing everything else going on in my life as a student. But no one tells our stories. So, my goal is to tell the stories of the student journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers all across the country. Let's walk the student beat. Welcome in. Today we're walking the student beat with Jonathan, Jonny, Timm. Jonny, how's it going, man?
It's going great, Colin. Glad to be here, and I like what you got going on with the Student Beat podcast.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Obviously, of St. Norbert College up in Wisconsin. I want you to give me just an introduction to yourself, a few of the basics, and then some of the journalistic outlets you worked for.
So, like you mentioned, in Wisconsin, born and raised, a small town kid. My graduating high school class was 36 kids, if that gives you a little bit of a perspective. And, choosing St. Norbert College, it didn't quite appeal to me at first because it was the closest school to my hometown. Now, my two older brothers who had gone to college and I got to witness them go through the process of picking their school, they were in Minnesota at St. Mary's University. And I wanted to have that independence to kind of learn how to live life a little bit and, be in a dorm, learn the great life skills that come with going to college. But I never thought it would be right down the road in De Pere, Wisconsin, which is neighboring Green Bay. Now, I had done a ton of job shadows for Fox 11 News and other sports work, and a lot of them said, the big school route really is a prominence and great way to go if you want to get into this field. But when touring St. Norbert's, it just felt like home to me. I also was able to sit down with Mike Counter, who was a sports anchor for Action 2 News and did a lot of work for the Green Bay Packers. And he was the one who sold me on the idea of becoming a Green Knight, which is the St. Norbert College mascot. And what what sold me was the hands-on opportunities that a small school brought to the table. First dibs on broadcasting any type of game. The Green Bay area is small enough to where it's not, that big city vibe, but it's still large enough, 100 or 300,000, the population of the metro area, to where there's plenty of opportunities to grow in the professional world. So I wanted to get into sports broadcasting. I knew that right from the get-go in fourth grade when my teacher made me do a class play, and the only part of the play that appealed to me was the sports announcer in the play called The Cheetah and the Sloth. So there's a fun story right off the bat. But upon arriving to St. Norbert College, I was able to get my hands on with broadcasting men's and women's basketball and softball. I learned a public address announce. I had an internship with the Press Times Green Bay to get into the writing element as well. I had a small stint with the Green Bay Packers as a media transcriber. And all of that work set me up nicely to find a summer home in the last 2 summers. And how I met you was through the Great Lakes Summer Collegiate League and the Muskegon Clippers organization, which is a proud and growing team, as you've seen for sure, similar to the Hamilton Joes. And yeah, right now or yesterday, I just signed a contract to work for National Soccer Network. I have not called a soccer game in my life, but what they told me is if you can call hockey and basketball and football, soccer should be a breeze. So I accepted that position as well. And I'll also be doing some freelance writing out in Muskegon as well. So right there is a little bit of a background of what I've done so far in my early days in entering this field.
Absolutely. That's an impressive list to start off there. You mentioned how we met last summer. You're calling baseball for the Muskegon Clippers and the Great Lakes Summer Collegiate League. Last summer, I spent time with the Hamilton Joes, and we met in the championship round. We don't need to touch on it. Don't worry, I won't get you there. But want to ask you first about. I mean, you already kind of mentioned the story in fourth grade of the play and everything, knowing you wanted to go into sports broadcasting. But I still want to ask about your story, your journey into the journalism world, about how you really got your foot in the door, especially at St. Norbert's.
Well, in high school, I didn't want to take art classes and shop classes and agri- agriculture classes were okay because, like I said, a small town of 36, they were almost a requirement. But my English teacher, Mrs. Kim Ludke, did a great job of setting me up for an independent study, and that class was called sports broadcasting. So Instead of having the normal textbooks, she bought me Al Michaels' autobiography, a couple of other books to read as well, and also told me to do a ton of research. Along with that, with the help of our guidance counselor, and like I mentioned earlier, I was able to do some job shadowing as well. And that gave me the initial base knowledge going into college on how I should maybe handle everything. But arriving to college is when you really learn the do's and don'ts. And, coming to a small school, we didn't have broadcast journalism as a degree or, sports media as a major by any means. It was the grand old C word, communications. But I made sure to have the media studies concentration just because I figured it would go along best with wanting to get into sports broadcasting. So, just overall, getting the experience of broadcasting games, even though I really stank at first, it was painful watching or listening to my voice after those first couple of broadcasts, and learning how to prepare was the most difficult thing. However, I had a great mentor in Tony Giordana, who now has recently obtained his master's degree in broadcasting from Syracuse and does work with the Green Bay Rockers out of the Northwoods League. But making the connections was one of the first things I realized, and I'm sure everyone in this field knows, you don't need me to tell you that, is probably the most essential part of it. And not getting discouraged when one opportunity doesn't go your way. After my freshman year, I didn't have a summer broadcasting job. I just worked at a cheese factory, which is the most Wisconsin thing ever, isn't it? I swear there are more cheese factories in my county than traffic lights, and I wish I was kidding about that. But after my sophomore year, after I had 2 years of experience, I had that stint with the Packers, which looked good on my resume. That is when I applied to a mass amount of summer wood bat leagues, and a few of them extended contracts. And at the end of the day, the Muskegon Clippers were the best. And I'm still with them. I'm going into my third summer with them, and that experience in my first 2 years of college, I feel, was the greatest way to put my foot in the door while still being a student.
Yeah, say Muskegon's got a great organization up there. Got a lot of good stuff going on. For those that aren't aware that are listening, well, even like just for our All Star game last summer, Muskegon like ran the show for the broadcast itself because they have such a good setup. And you obviously have been integral to a lot of stuff going on up there. But I want to ask quickly about Green Bay Packers and everything before moving on with some other stuff. So, what'd you say it was that you did there again?
So one day I get a call from my coach, and for the record, I one of the reasons I chose St. Norbert was in addition to my career development, it gave me the opportunity to continue athletics and track and field and cross country. And I don't get calls from my coach very often, so I thought maybe I was in trouble or for something. But instead, he pulls me aside and asks, I told Mike Counter, the same guy I mentioned earlier who got me to St. Norbert, that you're not a guy who makes excuses. Now, a little background story about that. I fell out of shape freshman year and had to lose a lot of weight and did cross country to do that, to be the high jumper that I am now. So once Mike found that out, went back to the Green Bay Packers and said, "Hey, you need some game day help? Here's your man." And so I was all in as a temporary media transcriber, which involved nothing during the game. Once I got my credentials and lanyard, it was like being a kid in a candy shop, just getting to be in the press box and being right next to the booth where Joe Buck and Troy Aikman were at the time. I believe it was Greg Olson for that game. But anyway, after the game is when we all went down to the press conference, and that's where my duty kicked in. I was maybe 10 yards away from the podium, and it was so cool. And my duty was to simply just type down everything that was said from the players or coaches on the podium and give prompts from the reporters. And the player I was assigned to was Aaron Rodgers. I had always daydreamed as a kid that if I was a professional football player, I'd be on the same team as him. But this was pretty close to it. And if you've ever heard that man talk, we don't need to get into the details of his behaviors now, but a lot of ums, a lot of pauses, and he talks very slow, which made my job a lot easier. And although it was just a one game stint because they have a whole team of individuals who take care of that type of stuff, it was just a mind boggling and it it was an inspirational moment for sure, and it's going to keep me going until I get back in a press box like that, hopefully with a mic and a headset.
Oh, absolutely. I like how you still use the yards reference and like for how far you were, because it's, I mean, with the football field, we got to mention yards and everything. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Buck, everyone there is absolute legends. But I want to touch back on St. Norbert's now. We kind of mentioned already, smaller school at the Division III level. And I think a lot of people I'm going to have on here are going to be from some larger schools. But why you mentioned it's more hands-on, and I want your perspective on that. Why is it more hands-on?
Well, just take a look at maybe around your group at Iowa. There's always going to be people assigned to different games, and there's a lot of work to be done at one of those bigger schools. So sometimes I'm not sure if this is all true or not, but I think competition can get involved. For me, I couldn't find enough people to help out. Reaching out to people to, hey, do you want to get into broadcasting? Do you want to make a little bit of side cash? That was in itself a difficult, one of the challenges of being at a smaller school because right away, sophomore year, I was the lead of all things St. Norbert Broadcasting and finding people to cover for me if I couldn't. And it was really, I have a really interesting story about how I found a analyst because I'm sure you realize calling games all alone can be difficult and it's a lot on the voice as well. And it's good to have that extra person there to bounce ideas off each other, all the basics and all that. But I was in a mass media communications class and there was a football player who I was, kind of friends with at the time. Didn't his name was Austin Miller, and I asked, "Hey, do you need a side job on campus? Do you want to get into sports broadcasting?" And he was like, "Sure." And just like me, he started off as a little shy and had some troubles, but he eventually we gained the chemistry, and I think that's so big in broadcasting. If you're not connected with your analyst, there's going to be issues. I read a lot about it in Kirk Herbstreit's autobiography and his, you know, I'm not going to say he clunked heads with Brent Musburger, but there was something off before Chris Fowler came to be the main guy for ESPN. And yeah, that I would say is one of the challenges. But the opportunities of just getting to simply do every game is incredible. And sometimes it was a little bit strenuous. For me, the weekend I did the Packers stint, that Friday nights I called two women's basketball games. That Saturday I did a college football game, and then two more women's basketball games that night. So to say I was well rested for that day with the Packers would be a lie. But I would say those are the benefits of being at a small school. Plus the faculty representation, they really care about the student body. And so it's easier to get your foot in the door through internships like I did with the Press Times because as you know, it's as a broadcaster, it's great to have all sorts of skills. You can't just show up and talk in the microphone. You need to know how to write. You need to know how to interview. You need to know how to research. And you even need to know how to get into the technical side of things as well, which I'm still learning to this day. But that is what I would say are some of the pros and cons of being at a smaller school.
Yeah, that's what I feel like I hear a lot. You got to be really well rounded with a lot of the jobs out there. And we'll touch more a little bit on that in the moment, but I want to ask you mentioned faculty. So I want to talk about obviously you also were an athlete at St. Norbert. And how were you able to balance that as well as was there any conflict of interest ever at all?
Occasionally, there would be some conflicting schedules, but the beauty of track and field is you can get better on your own. The sky is the limit. I mean, in basketball or in football per se, you need the whole squad there, your position coaches, and you need 22 men facing each other to run a play. In track, you can go for a run on your own. You can do a lift on your own. You can throw a shot put, do a little bit of pole vault, do some high jump on your own as well. And because it's an individual sport, obviously the team element is important, but the team element doesn't succeed without the individual success. So I also am very grateful to have a coaching staff that cared about me and my career as they do with our entire team. Because at the end of the day, it's Division III sports. We have no future in this sport unless you're one of my teammates, Mitch Van Boren, had a tryout with the Cleveland Browns. this past year. But anyway, my coaching staff was very flexible. They even let me skip a couple of meets as well. Notably, this year I got to do some color commentary for the Muskegon Lumberjacks hockey team when they came to Green Bay. The Lumberjacks are a neighboring USHL team to the Clippers, and when they came to my hometown, I reached out to them and asked if I could hop on, and I got permission from my coach, and he was all for it. So at the end of the day, if there is a sport where I could balance broadcasting and competing, it's probably track or swimming, cross country as well, which I did for a year. But I didn't find a challenge at all in balancing the two.
That's really impressive there. And then, I mean, obviously, you mentioned that we're not every single meet, but let's go ahead and briefly touch on the track and field portion of everything. You were more field events, correct?
So I came in as a cross country runner, believe it or not. But after I got my wisdom teeth pulled out in high school, I couldn't run distance for a brief stint, but I still could high jump. And when after I made state in that event, I reached out to my coaches at St. Norbert, hey, I really don't want to distance run anymore. But as we talked about earlier, my freshman year, falling out of shape, it was actually quite essential to have them both. So my sophomore year, I was actually a cross country runner and high jumper. In my junior year, I kind of was under the realization that I was average at everything. So I had a conversation with my coaches, and they said, hey, why don't you become a decathlete? Well, now with four all conference awards in the multi and one in high jump, I think it was a great choice. And it was a big contributing factor to our team winning four consecutive titles my junior and senior year with indoor and outdoor included. So that my athletic career had a wonky road, but it was a promising one at the end of the day.
It sounds like it was a right move. I mean, I definitely couldn't do any of that. There's a reason I stay on the broadcast side of things, but um no, impressive there yet again. I want to touch on the Muskegon Clippers, obviously going into your third year there. I want to ask you, as a student, you're going into a small school and then you're going off and working somewhere differently over the summer. How does that help you grow with your professionalism, and what do you learn from two different locations?
Well, first off, when you're at school, obviously, in addition to the student work that's done on the broadcasting side, classes have to come first. I mean, college can be difficult, but a lot of it is all in time management. I actually found that going to Muskegon in the summer was a lot more beneficial to my broadcasting development just because that's all I put myself into. Obviously, I did some training for track and field, and I did a little bit of side hustling as well because got to pay the bills. But learning to live on my own again, learning to make connections and have a well-rounded social group because you're not living with your best friends in a professional world like you are at college. And that to me, I think was the biggest factor, struggling and being a little bit lonely. I'm a very social person. I love talking to people and talking to friends, and that's why leaving college was a little bit difficult. But it helped me develop a routine, one, and then B, with the Clippers, similar to what you got to do with the Joes, the opportunity to travel and do road games as well and live like a real life broadcaster.
Yeah, so you guys have a greater travel schedule, I think, than most any team in the Great Lakes Summer Collegiate League. So I want to ask you about, like, how was it difficult to travel as much as you guys did? 'Cause I know we travel, but it's not the same as you guys do.
Oh, I enjoy it. Let's get that out of the way first. But there are challenges that come with it. My first year, I was a member of the All Star broadcast team, and we get back at 5 in the morning. And then at 8:30, the alarm goes off because we have a doubleheader that day against the Michigan Monarchs. Trying to prep for my pregame shows and do some research on the players with very little sleep. That was the first brick that hit me that said, hey, it's not going to be all fun and games. Sometimes, if you really love it, you're going to have to do it even when you quote unquote don't want to do it. But once you get behind the mic and start talking, it's all muscle memory, like riding a bicycle. And like you mentioned, I think that's one thing that really separates the standard in the Great Lakes Summer Collegiate League. The fact that the Clippers can put on a winning product, a high quality product, while still having to travel all across the greater Michigan and Ohio areas.
Yeah, I mean, you guys had a lot of travel and really, it's a fun atmosphere. I remember going up and like every like in between innings, you guys had a game or something going on. It was a lot of fun. But I also want to ask about your work in Muskegon with, I don't know if the right word would be a podcast, but I know even during the off season, you're still interviewing incoming players. I want to ask about your work with that.
So part of my contract with the Clippers is to do some off-season content videos. Now that ranges from the coaching staff, the front office, our PA guy, some of the returning players. But that podcast was actually my media studies major capstone. I, I didn't want to do a big, boring research project where I just looked at scholarly articles and had to cite everything and all that. Even though I did a little bit of that work, even though I did a little bit of that with this project, I wanted something that would help develop my professional career that was also fun. And it counted for my grade as well. I did get a good grade on it, an A minus on that project. But it's something that I knew that even after it was not gradable, after I received my diploma, that I can continue to carry it on. And I know, and I think I know that you know as well that there's a market for Clippers baseball. When the Hamilton Joes were in town, that was quite the festivities, just because they're one of the premier organizations. And a season in the 2023 season, we had not played them. So if we can fit, 500, 600 plus people in the stands, there's got to be that many people who want to listen to a podcast. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done, maybe in the audio quality and my skills as a podcaster in general. But I learned that some of the live episodes that I did with some of the fan favorite players were big time hits. And in the off season, I always try to catch up with even former players. One of my favorite ones was Cincinnati Reds outfielder Blake Dunn, who was a Muskegon Clipper back in the 2018 season. So in the off season, there's a lot of work that goes on, and I also want to get into the marketing side and promotional element of things with the organization as well. So ultimately, you learn a lot about the ins and outs and work behind the scenes within an organization when you've been with a team this long.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving my Cincinnati Reds a quick shout out there. I know you're a Brewers fan. I think you're wearing your Brewers polo right. Yep, there it is. We'll give the Brewers a little bit of a shout out right now. Um, but you mentioned live episodes. Was that just the interviews you did post game, or what were the live episodes like?
So I did one live episode this year. I wanted to really change things up and not have it simply just talking about the last season or players' stats and stuff, because that can only come in one ear out the other of fans so often. I wanted to make unique experiences such as the crossover episode with the Lima Locos, bringing on players obviously because I mean people can only hear my voice for a summer wood bat league in the month of February for so long. But the live episode I actually did on X Spaces. Now that, oh man, the technical difficulties for that episode were a handful. I probably should have rehearsed it a little bit, but we did have about 40 to 30 people, 30, 40 people tune in, which was my biggest hit as an episode. And I thought to myself, not bad for a summer wood bat team. So that was with Aaron Pisecki, an infielder from Central Michigan.
No, not bad at all. And all right, here's the part where I love talking to the other broadcasters, then we can have a little bit of fun with it. Do you have any like special routines or rituals before a game or in the way that you prep for a game at all?
Well, what I always like to tell broadcasters on the rise is it takes 2 hours of research, 3 pages of notes for a 3 hour presentation. I know it doesn't sound the most glamorous and elegant at first, but once you get a routine, like you talked about, which is so important, it's all fun and games. So with the Muskegon Clippers, my pregame routine looks a little bit like this. Um, I will I'll actually, while I get ready, I will listen to the MLB on TBS song, the instrumental version, just to get me excited and to make it feel like the game is, bigger than it actually is. Once I arrive at the ballpark, I'll set up my equipment. And before the producers arrive, I like to chit chat with the players, ask them what's going on. I'll do a quick interview with a coach, a player, and post it on X, which also gets distributed to the Clippers Facebook and Instagram as well. And then after I get the lineup cards and I have all that squared away, I go down on the field, I grab my baseball glove, and I help shag batting practice. I don't run around in the outfield or take hot shot ground balls, but Coach Brian Wright, who's been a long time Michigan high school baseball coach and is a Clipper assistant, he hits ground balls to the infield. And once they fire to first base, I'm waiting there with my big lefty mitt, and he fires to me, and I toss Brian Wright the ball. But it also gives me a chance to talk to each player as they enter the batting cage and exit. How's it going? Any updates? How's your injury doing? Congrats on your recent commitment. How do you feel? Because that gives me more to talk about during the game. You can't, especially in a TV broadcast, there's a lot of downtime because there's not always a ball in play. So the more you have to talk about to keep the fans engaged, I think is very critical. And then once my producers arrive, or our producers, I should say, it's time to get some of the equipment squared away, maybe some of the graphics that we'll use in game. We try to include trivia questions, which sometimes for a 40 game schedule are very hard to think about because, I mean, there's only so many records for a summer wood bat team. But the beauty is they get broken every year, at least a few within an organization that's only been in the league for 8, 9 years. So, and then once we'll start the pregame show at maybe 6:40 if it's a 7:05 first pitch. And I like to step aside and let our PA announcer and have his voice be heard on the TV broadcast to make the fans at home feel like they're at the game and in the beautiful Marshfield atmosphere. And then, so yeah, that's essentially my tradition. Well, after the game, one thing I've started doing is grabbing the microphone and grabbing the player of the game, and then we'll televise it on the stream for the broadcast. But the fans, obviously, in the stadium can hear as well. So I try to give both crowds the best of both worlds.
If that
So
doesn't
that's my routine. That's Clippers
yeah.
baseball for me.
And if that doesn't just show you the quality of the product you guys have up in Muskegon, I don't know what else will. That's my dog barking in the background right now. Yeah, hold on.
What kind of dog do you have?
I have a black lab slash boxer mix, kind of. We don't know what else he has because he's kind of a rut. The story is the mom got out one night and they don't know who the dad is. So they don't know what he's mixed with fully, but they know he's black lab and boxer. Our assumption is like he's a pit as well because we'll take him for walks and people will go, oh, this is a pit bull. No, he's not. Like the answer is typically no, but at this point, we've heard it enough that we're just assuming he might be that as well. I'm sure you could hear him a little bit in the background, so excuse me for that. There.
It's all good.
No, like, I'll give Daniel a shout out. You know Daniel Barnard of he was my partner at the Hamilton Joes last summer and is at Ohio University. We would look down when we were up in Muskegon and or even down in Hamilton. You seem like you were having a lot of fun pregame with shagging balls or talking to some of the players. So that's something we definitely notice. And now I'm coming up with different like names and segments for this. So we'll take a little water break real quick. The water break segment where I just want you to give a chance to tell some fun stories and any fun interactions you've had, weird interactions you've had, whether it's at St. Norbert up in Muskegon. Some of the first things that come to mind for stories that you tell people.
Uh, well, one of the biggest keys, like I said, for broadcasting is coming prepared. So even though I'm the St. Norbert broadcaster, I talked to every visiting coach before the game. Now, our women's basketball team, they are as dominant as can be. And I also try to talk to both coaches at halftime, which having an analyst, it's easier to have him go get him or her get one coach and then me get the other. So I always hated when I would have, or I shouldn't say hate, but I always very disliked interviewing the away coach when our women's team was up by 50 at halftime. I'm not going to say the name of this coach, but I've been cussed at, I've been cried to. That's what makes it kind of a difficult task to do. But at the end of the day, if you have a good relationship with them and develop that mutual trust, they shouldn't have a problem with you talking to them, even if they're down by 50 and all is gray.
Yeah, I'll tell you
Um,
that's yeah. That's not even just like I know it's like more so a small like the smaller school and everything. I've had a few interact like I'll talk to coaches pregame before I go on a Big Ten Plus broadcast, and some of the opposing coaches are so nice. They don't have some of those broadcasts because they're from like a smaller D1, and then some of the other coaches just don't want anything to do with us. I get not the same exact thing, but I hear what you're saying.
and I definitely agree with you. There's coaches who, especially at the Division 3 level, are thrilled that we're taking our job so seriously, and others that will look at us and say, it's D3 basketball. It's like, okay, I won't put you on that pedestal then, but I will anyway on my there, because that's just who I am. I'd say a second funny story is my first ever broadcast with the Muskegon Clippers. This wasn't a Great Lakes Summer Collegiate League game. It was an exhibition contest against the Manistee Saints. With a one in or yes, with a 2-1 count, there was a foul tip that came back to the net, maybe 10 feet to the left of me, and I was like, "Oh, that was close." And now you know where I sit, right behind home plate with the nets, and I had my computer propped up right up against it. And I thought to myself, man, I better be careful this year. Well, the very next pitch, another foul tip, and man, I can still reword everything I said during the everything that followed. Matthew Hoover from Western Michigan was on the mound, and the 2-2 count was delivered, and that one came right back at me and just shattered my college computer. All the stats, all the pregame notes I had, I didn't have a scorecard at the time. It was all destroyed. And my producer quickly fires up his mic, and Joe Kanukin, an all-star producer, by the way, shout out Joe, goes, "Did it get you, Jonathan?" And I'm just looking in complete distress at my computer that had everything on it, smacked to smithereens from that foul ball. And we're still live. And I go, "Yes, it is, sir." Man, oh man. And must I remind the viewers that this was the first at bat in the top of the first inning for the first game. I'm however far away from home, and I'm a college student. I don't have the means for a new computer, but I saw the pitcher was in the windup, and I go, "But we play on." And then it's swing and a miss. Matthew Hoover with the punch out. And in between innings, I put my head down and I was just like, what do I do? And the team owner, who's also my host family, goes up to me and says, "Don't you worry, we will get you a new one." And that is the first sign that I realized this is a great organization. That the fact that they were willing to compensate for the damaged computer, and that's the one I'm calling you for right now. This Lenovo Yoga, it has been doing me wonders ever since my old HP Red one got damaged by the foul ball. So that was a great first memory of being with the Muskegon Clippers.
Absolutely. I mean, my heart probably would have dropped if my computer just shattered. Even I don't think it would have mattered if I was during a broadcast or not for me. If my computer breaks, I'm calling it in, going home for the day.
But the urge I needed to hold back any sort of coarse language or even show any emotion because that was what was going through me. I mean, you can tell I feel like I played it off pretty smooth, but deep down, my mind was going a million miles an hour in a million different directions. So the rest of the game, I had I would just use I would just use my phone and would look up at the stats on my phone. I had it saved to a Google Sheet, all the game information, which I could just simply do from my phone. But yeah, that man, I watched that clip to this day. I really hope it goes viral. I sent it to ESPN's TikTok and Instagram page. Never got an upload, but it, let's just say people immediately knew who I was after that because of how hilarious for them it was. And for me looking back, it was pretty funny too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've got a few more, just a quick few more things for you. Now, I just want to, closing out of that, heading into the fourth quarter at this point, I want to just ask you, from your perspective, it's going to be different from a lot of others. Why is student journalism important? Why should it be looked at and respected by those just wanting content?
Student journalism, I think, is very important because, I mean, in the world we live in today, we see media from so many different sources, and when does it ever all totally add up? So I think if people, especially high school, college age, can learn the facts and learn how to properly research stuff and have the information to back it up, it's going to go a long way, not only in their career, not only in their job aspiration, but how they interpret the world. And I think critical thinking is also very important. At St. Norbert College, they prided themselves in being a Catholic Norbertine liberal arts institution, which doesn't tie to anything political. It just means being a well-rounded individual and having knowledge in a lot of different areas. And journalism, I think, is one of those areas where you're always unpacking the information. You're always trying to tell the story. And, everyone's got their own story to tell. So why not tell it to the fullest extent? What makes a story unique if it's not going to be told the right way and everything's not there? So, like we've been talking about, my story's a little bit different coming from a small school, but I'm embracing it and I'm excited. One of my favorites, now this is another Brewer reference, one of my favorites role models is Brian Anderson. He was nothing more than an alumni D3 baseball player coming out of college, but slowly worked his way up the spectrum to where he is now at the national level when he's not with the Brewers. I am excited for him to come back to the Brewers, by the way, because he's just always a spectacular voice to hear. But yeah, that's why I would say journalism is important, especially. I really wish that we would have had a more specific major to that at St. Norbert College, because I definitely would have taken a lot more interest in it than just an internship and the one class I had in it. But I would say that those are some of the important things to think about.
Absolutely. And then I'll leave you with this point here. Just want to ask, like, because you kind of mentioned something earlier, but if you had advice for someone who was just starting to step into broadcasting, whether it was at a high school or even in high school, what would be your main piece of advice to them?
Well, first off, get connected. It's not always what you know, it's who you know. And like I said, you don't need me to say that to those who are already in this field, but to those starting out, I think it's an important message to get into your head. And second, be prepared for setbacks, be prepared for failures. It's a very unforgiving field, as you can probably imagine. I mean, you can pour your heart and soul into an application, to hundreds of applications, and it's just not going to go your way all the time. Because at the end of the day, this is a high competition field with a very low demand. And sometimes job applications will say, we were thrilled that you were one of our 384 applicants, but you know, opportunities will come. And for young broadcasters starting out, opportunities are there. High schools, junior colleges, small colleges, or in your situation, the University of Iowa, which is a great opportunity to get that hands-on experience and learn a lot of in-depth stuff that I wish I would have gotten to know when I was in college as well. But yeah, ultimately, anyone can practice broadcasting. Anyone can turn on a game and turn the volume down and do a little bit of research on the players and practice and see how they like it.
Absolutely. All right, let's close this thing out. Anything you want to like plug real quick, give yourself a shout out for all your work and everything?
Well, be sure to follow me on Instagram at JonnyTimm25, all lowercase. Of course, X. I actually think my X tag's different. Yes, my X tag is Jonny Timm. No H in Johnny. You would not believe how many times I have to instill that in people's heads. Add me on LinkedIn at Jonathan Timm, Facebook as well. And today I was thrilled to announce that I now have a freelance role with the National Soccer Network. And so that's all exciting stuff that I'm looking forward to get going with.
Yes, sir. I'll make sure I link all that stuff wherever this may be posted. But Jonny, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Colin. Go Badgers, huh?
Maybe. Once this fall, Iowa and Wisconsin plays, so maybe I'll message you with a little like off the side, small wager.
Alrighty, sounds good. Enjoy the Heartland Trophy.
Absolutely, I will. Make sure you check out all of Jonny's socials and work out there. And if you get bored this summer and want to watch some high quality baseball, make sure you tune in to a Muskegon Clippers broadcast where Jonny will be their main voice. And if you want to stay up to date with all upcoming episodes, make sure to follow me on X, C_Carithers33, for all updates on the Student Beat. For now, we just walked the Student Beat. I'll see you next week for a new episode.